welcome to No Art Exchange on this lovely warm Wednesday afternoon. My name is Saziso Phiri. I am the Associate Artistic Director here at No Art Exchange and also the curator for What Would I Be Without Everybody, which is a creative programme which has a focus on themes of care and community and their various interpretations. So this is a programme that consists of an art exhibition by artist Kim Thompson, and we also have had a programme of events which have included live performance, music, film, career development opportunities for creatives, and lectures and workshops as well. And as part of this programme, I'm really pleased to welcome Lakwena Maciver, who I'll be in conversation with, where we'll speak about the role of care and community within her work. So the event will consist of a quick presentation by Lakwena, which will then be followed by an in-conversation with us. And what I'll do is I'll just quickly do an introduction to Lakwena. So Lakwena Maciver is a London-based artist whose work has been shown internationally in cities including London, Paris, Rotterdam, New York, Los Angeles, Las Vegas and Miami, and at institutions including Tate Modern, Tate Britain, Yorkshire Sculpture Park, Somerset House, South Bank Centre in London and the Rotterdam Kunsthal. Her works in the public realm have ranged from one of the largest public artworks in the UK, wrapping an electrical substation in London, to a juvenile detention centre in Arkansas, a monastery in Vienna, and the Bowery Wall in New York City. Vibrant colour and bold text combine Lakwena Maciver's joyful and gently submersive work. Her paintings, murals and installations often reference everyday shared experience and popular culture, such as songs, fashion and basketball. Bringing messages of hope, possibility. Lakwena speaks to points of connection and commonality between people with a utopian vision that dreams of redemption and liberation. Her approach is instinctive and audio-didactic, producing visceral, rhythmic and immersive panel paintings, iconic murals and installations. So I'll hand over to Lakwena. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Saz. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. It's really nice to be asked to talk about my work. This is my first time in Nottingham, so it's my first experience of the place. It seems really nice so far. So you just heard the intro, kind of a quick biography about my work. I'm probably best known for making large-scale, very colourful public murals. And I thought I would kind of talk about what began, like why I make the work that I do, what began kind of my practice. So this is one of the first big murals that I painted, and it was in Miami in 2013. And it sums up what my focus was. I've spoken often, I don't know if you've heard me speak about my work before, but I often talk about the fact that it came out of a place of feeling very marginalized, growing up and being a minority and making work as a way to empower myself, build myself up, try and lift myself up by making these positive paintings that I felt very negative and just very low. So it came out of that place of sadness. And when I was very young, I spent quite a lot of time in East Africa, and I often kind of see that as like a paradise kind of place for me in my memory. And so this was my first really big painting, and it read, "I remember paradise." So it was going back to that root of what, kind of my happy place in a way, and then painting that in Miami. That led on to this series of works. So as well as looking back, I was looking forward to this idea of a future that was better than the present that I was in. And that's kind of, in a way, this is kind of where my work still goes. It's kind of looking back and it's looking forward to this kind of joyful place. And so these are just a few paintings from that time that came out of that series of work, I Remember Paradise. The Better's Yet to Come, both looking back and looking forward. And this is a little later on, and this was my first solo, no, I guess my first solo show in the UK, where I made this series of paintings, and the show was called The Future's Gold, obviously looking forward. At the time, 2017, I think 2016 was the Brexit vote, and 2017 was this just really politically charged. I feel like it was the beginning of this kind of season that we're in now, where everything became very polarized, everyone became very politically charged, everyone has an opinion about everything. And the point of this show, really, what I was trying to say was, I was looking beyond. I spoke about, I didn't bring it, but my statement for the show was that I was looking for a future government that was better than this one, that to be honest, no earthly government could kind of solve the problems and bring this utopia that we're all looking for. And so all of these works were pointing towards that, this idea of something beyond, something supernatural in terms of governance that would satisfy this yearning that we have for this kind of paradise that I spoke about in terms of the past, but also in the future. So that's what I was interested in. And yeah, all of these themes kind of resonate through my work even now. So this was a while ago now, 8 years ago. And I guess that with a lot of my work, there's these phrases that I use that then pop up in different projects later on. So they're kind of like, the timeline isn't necessarily like this, it kind of jumps around. This was, it's another example of one of the large-scale public murals that I did. This was in 2017. All of my work kind of revolves around my children. So this was after my first child. When he was 1, I started traveling around again. Really, I was desperately hungry to be out painting. So I traveled, I don't know, about 5 times in the space of a few months, once he was 1. And this is quite an interesting example of how my work exists in different ways. So I might make a painting, and then I might make a textile piece. And there are these various iterations of the same work, which is quite interesting, seeing it in different contexts. This is another painting. Cool. Oh, Mike's gone. A local space near me. Together we stand. So some of the themes you'll see popping up in the work are community, togetherness. I think my work has often been about, I guess my work has been a way for me to connect with people. It probably is for quite a lot of artists. I think we can tend to be fairly introverted, some of us. And for me, my work has always been a way of connecting with people. It's given me a role in a way. And I think that's quite an important theme in my work, is this idea of bringing people together and making space for people. This is an area, actually, it's called Seven Sisters, where a lot of homeless people congregate. And so it was this ugly kind of just grey kind of concrete. It's an air vent to the underground below. And so to paint that created this space that was much nicer, that now became something positive. So I think that's something that my work tends to do. And this is quite an interesting one to talk about, which was a youth detention center in Arkansas. And in a similar way, so this was working with young people. So we worked with members of the community and with like loads of people from the community, maybe like 20. It was a massive space, like a courtyard, probably about as high as this or even higher, with this mesh on the top that you can see there because it was to keep people in. And we worked with members from the community outside, but we also worked with 10 of the young people who were there. And again, my words that I use, sometimes they're my own words, sometimes they're referencing songs. This, obviously, Still I Rise, is Maya Angelou's famous poem. And Maya Angelou is from Arkansas, so I used that as a way to locate, to respond to the context, really. And some of the young people had never heard that poem, which is an incredible poem. And it was a really interesting project for me because a lot of my work is public, it's, you know, it's the kind of stuff that people kind of see, you know, lots of people see. No one's ever going to see this in real life, apart from the people who are in there. And I loved that idea of, in a way, re-centering who the audience is and who the work is for. These are exactly the type of people who will never go into galleries. They have literally been pushed to the side and locked away, you know, from society. And so it was very special to make this work, making it, and looking back now, when I look back at it, I'm like, yeah, that's a really important thing for me, that I'm making work that is not just for basically the elite or a very small portion of society who know about art or appreciate art or feel comfortable walking into a gallery, or maybe are able to afford a painting. So that's a big part of my work. A couple more images of that. And this led on to a project, also in Arkansas, but a couple of years ago, 1 or 2 years later, painting a basketball court. This was during COVID, so I couldn't paint it myself. I sent drawings. And this was really key because it kind of brought a bit of a transition for me. Well, it just brought an entryway for me into this theme of basketball, and I ended up making a whole series of works all around basketball. But the reason that I think basketball is an interesting thing is because, again, one of the key things that I'm interested in my practice is that my work is accessible. And basketball, for me, became a way of speaking to people who might not necessarily engage with, who might not know much about art, but might take an interest in basketball. It's this kind of universal, lots of people love basketball. So it became this way of speaking about some of the themes I wanted to speak about through making these portraits of different iconic NBA players. So these are a couple of the paintings. And this was quite a big body of work that I made. It was fun, it was kind of a series of these works. They were all playing with this idea. And basketball, obviously, here is the theme, but there are different, that's partly why I like to use, for instance, song lyrics in my work, because people know the songs, they're familiar with them. It's a way of connecting, and my work being accessible. I think my mic's going in now. So these are a few more of them. The jump paintings, we called them. This is just another example of, this is an example of a project that I collaborated on with Minnie. So another aspect of my practice is that I collaborate with brands. And part of that is financial, it makes sense. But another part of it, which is more meaningful for me, is that it means it engages this massive audience of people. And, you know, loads of people know Minnie. Another of the projects I'll show in a minute is H&M. I did a kids collaboration with them. And these are, what I love about that is that it just, that accessibility. Loads of people who would never walk into an art gallery but would buy a t-shirt for their kids now have connected with my work. That's another thing that I like doing. Another reason I like working with brands. So this was a wall in Walthamstow, local to me, that was part of this whole campaign with Minnie. And we ended making this car, which was from 1986, which I am also from 1986. And it was they took out the old engine and replaced it with an electrical engine, which was really exciting, innovative. And it was a really nice thing to do, fun project to work on. This is the collaboration with H&M, which has been really nice. My kids still wear these clothes, and it was a lovely one to work on. So I thought I'd talk a bit more about some of the paintings I've made. This was a project I wanted to speak about, which came out of COVID. So a lot of the projects that I work on come from a very personal place. And obviously, COVID was different for everyone, you know, lockdown and everything. I started making these paintings in lockdown, and I started painting my home, basically. And it was quite a kind of big, it brought a big change basically in my practice, because I started making these paintings and they were all about this idea of creating a safe space, that your home is a space where you have control over your home. And we were obviously all locked in our homes, and I started painting my home, and I was thinking about my kids and wanting to make a safe space for my kids. And a place, thinking about what I was speaking over them, what I was saying to them, what the words that were in my paintings. And this became a really key piece. I made this painting, Nothing Can Separate Us. It really resonated with people. It ended up being on the front of I think it was the Evening Standard magazine, and it ended up hanging on flags above Covent Garden when that reopened at the end of lockdown. I think it also went to Dubai, and it was basically a painting that I made in my family, in my living room, very personal place, but it really resonated with people. We ended up recreating my living room in Hastings Contemporary, and inviting people to come in and see this space that I'd created in a way. And then it ended up on the top of Temple Station. I think there was a video at the beginning earlier. And it was really lovely, because something that had begun from such a personal place became this massive, just this massive kind of floorscape on the top of Temple Station. And it's lovely again, because actually this was quite a forgotten area. It's right, that river in the background, I think you can see like a boat. That's the Thames, so it's a really central area. But no one really knows about it. It's on the top of this roof. And again, it was quite the kind of place where homeless people congregate. And so it was nice to create something really beautiful in that space, rather than it being derelict, filling it with colour. And it really being about connection. And this, the first time I saw this was today, which is the Google Maps image of it, which is really fun. That's why it's the right way up. But this is an image of it on Google Maps, so you can see the scale of the cars. And then finally, I thought I'd show this, which is a project in Brent Cross. This is one of the largest public artworks in the UK. Which I collaborated with architect Ifdu on, and it was to wrap a substation at Brent Cross. It read, "Here we come, here we rise and shine," and it was to celebrate and anticipate the opening of this new development called Brent Cross Town in Brent Cross. And yeah, so that's me. That's my little presentation.
That was really insightful, and I think, knowing these works, it was really nice to get more of a background behind each of them. So I suppose I want to kind of split this conversation into two parts, which is care, the care aspect, and then the one which is community. And you've all already kind of touched on the care aspect, really, in terms of the things that you care about. And one of the things that really stuck with me, actually, is that it's that thing of making art more accessible. So for me as a curator, when I started my practice as a curator, a lot of the works that I was doing were actually curating kind of like outdoor works and works in kind of informal spaces that people would come across, on their day-to-day, even people coming across unintentionally as well. And I think what really drove me to curate in informal spaces were the conversations that sometimes I would have with people in gallery spaces. Even though we want, working in a gallery, we want to welcome people in gallery space and we want them to be as welcome as possible. There still seems to be maybe a stigma or perception that gallery spaces are maybe for a certain type of people, or there's lots of different things that go through people's minds that maybe make them feel uncomfortable in gallery spaces. Even as a curator and someone who works in the arts, sometimes when I go into museums and galleries, sometimes, it can be overwhelming as well. And so what really has driven my kind of work, the work that I do in informal spaces is that care, you know, the stories of artists and the, you know, the narratives, the things that they're speaking about in their work, the skill is being able to showcase that to the wider world. And I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more, or for you to speak a bit more about that care that drives you to make art more accessible. And maybe that comes from maybe your own experience with art, maybe growing up. I don't know if you went to museums or galleries growing up, but it'll be good to know. Yeah, I'd love for you to kind of elaborate on that a little bit, on that drive of care for...
I think, I'm with you. I think I went to museums and galleries a bit when I was growing up, but I think like most people, I remember when I first, when I first studied actually, so I studied graphic design, that's my background, and when I first started the course, I was one of those people, can you hear that? Is my microphone going in and out? I was one of those people who rolled my eyes at modern art, you know? Like, and I think most people do.
Oh, I just want to check, is the mic...
Putting your pack on the table.
Yeah, sure.
Slightly out of range.
Okay. I think most kids, for instance, probably, I guess conceptual art is what I'm talking about. Anyway, so when I started studying, I was really like hating it because it was super conceptual. And so I hated it first. But then something happened, I had kind of like an epiphany, and I started to open my mind to this, and I was like, oh, there are loads of possibilities. You know, it's actually quite exciting. But I think the reason I bring that up is because I think I came from a place of not connecting with conceptual work. And I think a lot of contemporary art is very conceptual. And having come from that place, I could see just the reality that the majority of people don't connect with it. And I think, like, what is this stuff? You know, this isn't good, you know. So I think that's just the reality. And I think I want to make work that... I just want to make work that lots of people can connect with. I think there's a place to make work for making work that hardly anyone understands, and that you need like an MA in art history to understand. There's a place for that. But I wanted to make work that more people could understand. That was it, really. Just so that more people can connect with it.
And like with your work, you know, a lot of obviously your work is very text-based as well. And I mean, we'll get onto it with the community bit in a bit more detail, but it's interesting that you use a range of references, pop culture references, so from song lyrics. I felt like the whole twist and ha-ha was quite interesting as well. It will be interesting to hear about kind of what that thought process and that, you know, when you are preparing a work or you've got a commission for something, what that thought process is and how you come up with those references or how you choose those references. And I suppose as an artist, kind of thinking about the care aspect, because you are an artist who really wants to engage, you know, with audiences, or wants your work to really speak and engage to audiences. It will be really interesting to hear about the kind of what goes through your mind, or even just an example, for example, of a work that a piece of text that you've picked for a particular piece of work, and why you've chosen that specific work, and maybe if you have any aims or outcomes of how you want that to reach or speak to audiences.
So in terms of where the words come from, it can just be anything. I guess I read, I watch, I listen, and it just comes from stuff like that, you know. I don't have a scrapbook of, to be honest, I have my sketchbook where I'm always thinking about it's full of words. Words is like the key, it's almost the anchor of my work. But a specific example, let me think. I can't think of a specific example, but I guess the jump paintings were quite an interesting example of, if you think about the words that I used in those, that's the series of paintings referencing basketball players. So I thought about various nicknames that the basketball players were called. Also like even down to like the terminology of basketball, there's a move called gathering. I don't know loads about basketball, but I learned a bit. And just things like that where, but then gathering for me has all these other connotations of gathering people together, which I think is really beautiful. And so for me, there's quite a lot of wordplay, and I'm interested in how there can be different readings of one word, you know? And I spoke about how in my ha-ha paintings, they were really kind of shouty and preachy, and I was trying to make a point, which was that that's not what I like to do. I like to make work that is saying something, and I know what I'm trying to say, but it can be read in any way, and it's almost for you to uncover what you want to read into it. So yeah, it's kind of layers of meaning and an openness that's what I'm interested in doing with my work.
And something that I've been thinking about a lot for a while now is the term curating. So for those who aren't aware, curate or curator, when we think about etymology, the origin of the word is to care. Is a Latin word. And that was originally used in churches. So before, I suppose, the term preacher, I hope I'm getting it right, or priest, they were called a curator.
Yeah, you have a curate, don't you?
Yeah,
in like the Anglican church.
Curare is the word,
right,
yeah. And so I often do think about care as curating, and just thinking about you as an artist. Obviously, your work has evolved over the years, but it's still kept this, it's very colourful, text-based, positive, joyous messages of togetherness. And, sometimes when I think about an artist's portfolio or their work, it's almost like over time they're curating kind of work, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, organically. And what I found really interesting about your work, it's almost you've continued with like a really colourful palettes, kind of using lots of different dynamic shapes, text-based. Every now and again, there are figurative elements within your work. Do you think consciously about kind of like how your work is presented in terms of, or do you look back at other works and kind of learn from those in order to create other works, or do you feel like it's an organic process when you are creating work? And it'd be interesting just to hear about the use of colour as well. Yeah. The keeping your work quite colourful and vibrant as well.
Yeah, the colour's an interesting one because, like I said, it definitely began. So I was 8 when I came. I was born here, moved to Ethiopia for a bit, came here, arrived here when I was 8, and it was a bit of a culture shock. In Ethiopia, I'm not actually Ethiopian, but I looked Ethiopian, and I came here and I didn't look English, and I experienced some racism. I definitely, for the first time, felt alienated. It was also very cold and very grey. And the first thing I remember is coming off the plane and just the clouds. You know that when it's just overcast? I've got used to it now, and I love the weather here, to be honest. But it took me about 30 years. Now I really appreciate it. But I think that contrast for me was what I noticed. And I yearned for that warmth and that, when it's like it's springtime and it gets to maybe April and there's just like a bit of sun and you just on your face and you just feel a bit of just like you can relax just a little, just for that moment, and then the clouds come in. But so that is kind of what I was trying to recreate with the work, and the colour, all of that I think is what I was trying to do at the beginning. So that's where the colour came from. But I think as it's moved on, I don't know. I think I'm definitely looking back at other work. You find a way of working, don't you? And then you just continue working in that way. And also people see that you work in that way and like when you do that. And if you're doing, for instance, public work, there's always a process of approval. So someone will invite me in because they know my work and they want me to make work like that. Do you understand? So you can get into that kind of situation. But I like colour. And I think that's definitely where the beginning was this idea of referencing this idea of paradise and trying to somehow recreate that. That's where the colour came from.
And would you say, and imagine it, well, I can see that kind of extends beyond, I suppose, your own work, because, I mean, you always wear like really fabulously like colourful clothing. And would you say that is kind of part of that, like your, even just in the way that you present yourself, and you also, there was a series of paintings that you did, which were, or an installation that you did at Hastings, which was based on your house as well. Would you say that it really extends beyond kind of your studio or mural practice?
Yeah,
in terms
it does
of,
to some extent. Sometimes I wear all black, you know, partly convenience. I've got 3 kids now, and I'm like just practicality, dirt, you know, all that kind of thing. But yeah, colour's definitely a part of it. But it's almost a vehicle for me, the colour, I think. Yeah.
Right, thank you. And then before we go on to the kind of speaking more about community and the role that plays within your work and the various interpretations of community, obviously you've done some socially engaged work. So it was the Juvenile Detention Centre in Arkansas. Like, could you speak a little bit about the process of care with that? So obviously you would have been working with vulnerable people, and I imagine you've probably, you know, you've worked on other kind of socially engaged projects. As an artist, because I know we do have some artists here in the space today who have, who are either working or who are kind of starting to work more on socially engaged projects. Could you speak a little bit about those processes and maybe the different stages you go through in terms of care and, you know, yeah, I mean, I suppose particularly when you're working with vulnerable people and what that kind of collaborative process looks like from a perspective of care.
Yeah, I haven't worked on loads of socially engaged projects. I've done a few, and that was probably the one I was most excited about. When I work on social projects, I often collaborate with my sister, Abby Morrow. She's a musician, and she does loads of, her focus is community collaboration. She does incredible work with like all sorts of institutions and stuff. And so I often call her in and we collaborate in that way. Because I guess one thing I feel is that people often assume because I'm an artist, I can just do a workshop. And I feel like I really respect what she does and what people who do workshops do. And the fact that there is a real investment of time and practice, and it's a skilled thing that they do, and it's not something that I'm just going to pretend that I can do because I know how to paint. Do you know what I mean? So I often call in her, and so she collaborated with us on the Juvenile Detention Centre. We did a project recently with some young, I can't remember the name of the group, but we did a project more recently with a group of people where we did a workshop, and then we made a final piece out of that. And again, I collaborated with her on it because I just respect it, and I don't want to assume that I can just do it because I'm an artist, which I think is a little bit, I don't know, I just really respect people who work with community, and I respect that process.
Thank you. And because we're kind of leading into the community side of things, you started to speak about like collaboration. So when I was thinking about your work and community, I was thinking about like the different strands of communities, or the different communities that you belong to, or the different communities that you're part of. I suppose one of them, you know, would be kind of like the artistic community, the art world, your artist peers. Another one would be like your family community. And then I suppose it's the local community in which you reside, and also the different communities that you've kind of resided in. So obviously you mentioned you spent some time in Ethiopia, and so I'd love to kind of, you know, this season is called What Would I Be Without Everybody? And it's really about, it was inspired by a book, a series of conversations by an artist and a researcher that they had during the lockdowns. Mm-hmm. And a lot of these conversations were with people whose livelihoods or whose being just depends on other people. I suppose our lives do depend on, you know, that's other people keep us alive. But there were a lot of really interesting conversations, whether it was artists, people working in social practice, whether it was someone who owned a shop, and of course they are dependent on their customers, but also people who are maybe dependent on their neighbours.
Yeah.
And so, but it really made me start to think about how people make us what we are, and how, you know, other people shape who we are and can drive what we do. And it will be really nice to kind of hear about the different communities that you're part of and how they drive your work as an artist and maybe as a person. And I wanted to kind of start with your... Sorry. I wanted to...
Drop your pack on the table, please.
Sorry, yeah. I wanted to kind of start with, I suppose, your community, your most closest community, who your family. So obviously you mentioned your mother, 3 children, and you were practicing as an artist before you had your first child. How old's your first child now?
He's 8 now.
8. So it'll be interesting to speak about that community, but how being a mother has kind of maybe changed your practice, because I know that you sometimes take your kids to the studio, and I know that they were featured in the H&M campaign, and so I thought that's really nice that, it would kind of be nice to speak about the influence of family on your work and your practice and how that drives that.
Yeah, I think, well, I'm very grateful for them. It's lovely to have them. And it's, how does it influence my practice? Well, basically, they take up a lot of time, which I get to spend lots of time with them. But it means that my work has been, I have less time to make my work. So I think how they've affected my work, they've inspired me, because I think I was always interested in this idea of stories and the stories that we tell to each other about what's important. I guess the myths, mythology and the myths that we share. I was always interested in that, but I think having kids made me even more interested in that, in this idea of what stories we tell them about who they are, about what they are part of, who we are, what matters, what's important. So it's made me care even more about that. And I think, but it's also just shrunk the amount of time that I have to make my work, because I want to spend lots of time with them. So it's a choice for this season of my life, but it basically means that in this season of my life, I don't have as much time to make my work. So that's the main way they've impacted my work.
Yeah, and what I really loved, actually, you did a recent Instagram post of a piece of work that you made when you were pregnant with your first child, which I thought was, I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about that.
It was, what was it? It said, "You've been so good to me." I was just so grateful to be pregnant with him. I was so grateful, so happy. It's funny because, I've had 3 pregnancies, and the second one I was exhausted because I was running after the first kid. The third one, I got gestational diabetes, which is this thing, it's not the end of the world, I'm fine now. But it just wasn't that much fun. The first pregnancy, I was just so overjoyed with life inside me. So it was just gratitude for this little life. And that's why I made that painting.
And would you say, you mentioned that you don't have as much time to make your work, so I imagine you're much more selective, the type of work that you make. And would you say that's impacted maybe the scale of work that you make, or the type of detail that you input in your work?
I think it's affected my way of working. So for instance, the jump paintings that I made, I think we made 35 of those paintings. I had a team of assistants painting with me. I now have an assistant who works with me almost full time, who helps me to make stuff happen. Not painting, but just all of the kind of the admin. When I paint murals anyway, I paint with a team of people because it's such a big scale. But I think it's impacted that. It's also meant that I have to be more selective about what projects I take on. And I think that's the biggest way that it's impacted the work. And it's definitely, I think there's a freedom that I don't have. And it's my choice that I have, decided to do this. But for the next, for this season, it's just freedom that I don't have. I just have to be really as organised as I can be, as efficient as I can be, you know, in order to get stuff done. And that, I think any mother will tell you that, you know, regardless of their job. But I think as an artist, because you really want to give everything to it, it feels like a sacrifice, but it's a sacrifice that's worth it, in my opinion, which is why I made it. It's just, sometimes it's hard, you know, like all the sacrifices we make.
Yeah. And one thing that because I know that a lot of the mural, like the larger scale works that you were doing,
yeah.
I know that or earlier works you were often working with your sister.
Yeah.
She would help you paint those murals and stuff, which I thought was really interesting as well. And is she trained? Does she train in art as well?
She's a musician. No, she's a musician, but she did a little bit of some artwork, but no, she was able to, and that's actually what's quite nice about my work, is that anyone, like I said, like we had loads of community people helping us paint the Arkansas wall, and we had the 10 young people from the Juvenile Detention Centre. Anyone can kind of join in and make it happen once I've drawn it out. Do you see what I mean? So that is a nice, in that way it's accessible, but yeah. I think what I miss is probably the amount that I used to go around painting walls myself. I love that. It's fun. And I just don't have the capacity for that right now with the 3 kids, getting childcare for all of them. It's just tricky. So that's what I'm looking forward to once this season passes. And taking them along, like my 8-year-old, once he's 10, I'll take him along and we'll paint some walls together. That's my dream, you know?
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And I really wanted to kind of speak a little bit about one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of touch on family and kind of like you as motherhood and being an artist, is I know that there is I mean, for years have obviously been conversations, but there's been a bigger conversation and a more louder conversation around art and parenthood.
Yeah.
There was recently an exhibition at Spike Island, I think in Bristol, or Arnolfini, one of the two, about parenthood, artworks about parenthood. But I know that there's a wider conversation now around artist parents and kind of how they're working and operating. And I think even for me as a curator, thinking about how we kind of navigate things and work with artist parents, especially with younger children, and also special educational needs children, how we can fit within the schedules and being accommodating. Because I think one thing that I've realised is that I was working very much kind of just through the standard and not really thinking about actually people's routines or their capacities. And so, you know, I know that we do have some artist parents here in the audience as well. And so it's really interesting to hear about how your kids have driven your work, how they're involved in it, but the realities of working as a parent and an artist and balancing the two as well. So thank you so much for sharing that as well. And I wanted to go into kind of the other community, suppose that I didn't touch on when I first started speaking about this part of the conversation, which is the audiences that you engage with your work. So obviously you've spoken a lot that, you know, what the themes that drive your work, or togetherness and, you know, and unity. And, you know, obviously your work is, you have work in gallery spaces and outdoors as well. Do you get to engage much with the audiences, with, you know, I suppose in gallery spaces where your work is being exhibited, and what are those interactions like if you do get to, or have you had the opportunity to kind of speak to people who are gathered around your murals or like public installations?
I guess that was one thing that was interesting about painting walls when I was kind of earlier on, before the kids, is that you would be painting a wall and then you'd get the feedback right there. Some of it really annoying, just like, you know, people, no one really negative, because the work wasn't particularly offensive, but, you know, unless people are like offended by bright colours. But yeah, people, it just, you feel like you get that feedback, people just want to give their 2 pence worth, which is actually quite nice because you get that immediate response. But yeah, in terms of galleries and things like that, it's not quite the same. It feels more removed. Yeah, and I think that's what I appreciate about painting on the street.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of the other community that you're kind of part of, which is like the art world community, it'll be interesting to kind of hear a bit about, I suppose, the artists who've inspired your work, and you know who have inspired your work. It could be not necessarily visual artists, but maybe musicians or people who are kind of working within other mediums, and also kind of just your general peers, what you kind of learn from them or gain from them.
So who's inspired me? I have a little list. Whenever people say, oh, who inspires an artist, it's on my phone. Who comes to mind? I love the work of Emory Douglas. He was the Minister of Culture of the Black Panthers. Just incredible. Partly the reason that I loved his work is that it kind of spanned, I guess it's partly my interest in graphic design and the fact that it was, I guess, accessible. It wasn't just hung on walls. It was being put into this newspaper that was then sent out to people, and it shaped this whole identity of this group of people. So I find artists like him really inspiring. Hassan Hajjaj, who I noticed he's spoken, has he been in, has he had a show here?
Yes,
yeah, so he's a friend and he's incredible. And he's someone who I really respect and admire. And again, I love the way that his art spans different media. It's now in galleries, but his background was like, I think, club nights, and he had his kind of like his fashion label, and he's very much kind of engaged with community and culture outside of just the fine art world. So I think artists like that are the ones that really inspire me and who I aspire to be like. Yeah.
And I think what's quite interesting, particularly about Hassan's work, is like yourself, he's got that balance between kind of like commercial projects and then also gallery institutional projects as well, which is interesting. And there's something really fun and joyful about a lot of his works. And actually, just speaking about Emory Douglas, I don't know if you managed to see it when you were coming into NAE, but we have a mural at the side of the building. So if I'm not mistaken, it was the first Black History, purposely made Black History mural in the UK. I'll have to fact check that.
Is it on the right or the left?
It's on this side. If you come out, it's on the right of the building. If you come out this way, but the figurative images in that mural are based on Emory Douglas's work as well. So you'll have to have a look at it when you before you leave today. And then just kind of thinking about like your peer group. Do you obviously you have your within your studio practice, obviously you have like an assistant who supports you with kind of the logistical and admin works, and obviously in the past you've had assistants who've helped on
project
larger
by
scale
project.
works. And could you speak a bit about that kind of community effort as well, and what that working environment is like, working with a
it's
community
fun.
of artists?
I think I have lots of like dreams for where it will go. But at the moment, it's been, like I said, a project by project. So it started when I was painting big walls, and I'd have maybe 3 people who'd come alongside me, and we'd paint a big wall together and bash it out in, like, I don't know, a week. And then when I started making these paintings in the studio, and I was like, okay, I need a team, then I gathered a team around me, and we had maybe 4 to 5 painters who would come in and paint with us. And it was fun. I feel like I've seen the beginnings of what that can be. I have these dreams of like sitting down for these studio lunches that I've read about in the past. We haven't had quite that yet. We've had a few studio dinners, but I mean like daily, routines where you stop all the work and you kind of connect. That's my dream. But at the moment it's been really nice, and sometimes skill sharing, which is really nice, the beginnings of that kind of thing where you've got people with different skills who are teaching, I guess, and learning from each other and figuring things out. So that's been really fun and nice, because a lot of my work has been a lot of it has been me doing it on my own. And so to have people in there, which is, you make yourself kind of vulnerable in a way, because you're then opening up your space. But I've really enjoyed it, and I look forward to. So right now my studio is being renovated, and the landlord has renovated it, and I moved back in September. So that's going to be a new chapter. and hopefully preparing for a show in Feb, I think, which is quite exciting. And so there may be, again, I'm moving basically back to Ridley Road, which is a famous market really close to my house. And I was in there for 8 years. Then I moved out, this kind of more fancy studio, which was very big and worked, but it was a bit like soulless. And so I'm moving back to Ridley Road, and I'm really excited about that because it is really in the heart of the community. It's a market, so it's buzzing. And then you go up the stairs to my studio. But I'm excited, like my dream, like I say, a lot of it is dreams, but my intention is that the studio will become more open. Like I really want to have more people coming through the studio and coming in and out. So that's my plan from September, to have a bit more of that.
Is that more kind of open studio invitations?
Yeah,
or?
That's what I want to have. I want to have like actual, open studios, which I know is not like a revolutionary idea. But for me, as somebody who tends to be fairly introverted, it's quite scary, you know, to do that. But that's my intention. And I'm telling everyone, so now I've got to do it. But I think like to have that fairly regularly. My dream would be to have like, you know, also community workshops, like just regularly paced, to be just part of the thing. So we'll see where it goes. And maybe in, 5 years we'll chat and I'll say, it's happening. But that's my plan, even from September, to just start in baby steps, doing that more.
And is that more, and the drive for that, is that more kind of engaging with the community? Is it more skill sharing?
It's just about connecting, you know, like, because I just really think that's what life is about, is connecting, and connecting with people, because I think there's quite a lot of people who've seen my work online on screens, but I like the idea, and like I said, art for me is a way of connecting with people. It's like, it's what I do, and it gives me kind of a role. But I think the idea of actually then taking the conversation further and deeper, even, coming here today and being able to speak and physically, this is a really, we couldn't do this in lockdown, could we? And I think that made me really, I know it was a while ago now, but it gave me more of an appreciation for it. And I think, I would just really like to connect with people and just have conversations, because that's what my work is really, that's what I want to do with my work. I don't want it just to sit on walls and have people trying to figure it out. I actually do want to connect with people through it.
Thank you. And then I suppose kind of going on the last kind of community that I wanted to speak to, or the last kind of group of people that I suppose make your work what it is, thinking about what would I be without everybody and influences, before we open it up to Q&A, is so obviously going back to pop culture references that you have in your work. So at the moment I've got Candy Stations, you've got The Love in My Head, because I saw the work on the slide, which is great, because it's I do really love that song. And also thinking about, Higher, the Higher song. It's called Lift You Higher, or is it just called Higher?
No, I mean there's...
Your Love Keeps Lifting Me Higher, but that one, song, and it just be, and of course you use Maya Angelou's reference and kind of Still I Rise on that installation. It would just be really interesting just to hear about just generally how pop culture, like the part it plays in your life, like music. I'd just be really intrigued to hear about kind of like your just general kind of like musical interests or films, or who've kind of shaped who you are creatively, but as a person, and those kind of things that feed into your work as well. I just found it really interesting. And
I think none of my like taste is particularly like highbrow, or I'm not into like those really. I'm into it's all quite kind of like everyday stuff. So that's why, those songs are songs that kind of everyone kind of knows. It's nothing particularly niche. It's not like a really cool subculture or anything. It's just stuff that I think there's so many songs, images, words that we're in a very image-saturated culture, but also a text-saturated culture. So I think there's so much to pick from. And I think what I'm interested in is those things that we just see every day that sometimes we don't necessarily interrogate, but we just know these things. They're very familiar to us. And I'm interested in looking at going a bit deeper into, who's she talking about when she says, your love has lifted me higher, and sometimes researching these songs and finding out what the roots of them are. And I think that's what I'm quite interested in. Something else I was going to say. I can't remember. But yeah, I guess in terms of one thing on that is that growing up, I didn't feel like I had a super, like I say, my mum and dad were not weren't into any cool subcultures, and there was no kind of I don't feel like I had a super rich kind of cultural upbringing, but we did sing a lot, and I think that was probably quite a big part of my family culture, is that my mum and dad both sang a lot, and we sang in church, and we just sang. We sang because most people can sing. I know some people can't sing, but if you can sing, then you can just sing. You don't need an instrument or equipment. You can just sing, and I love the immediacy of that. It's a bit like painting, because if you have a paintbrush and paint, you can just paint. You don't need kind of a whole setup, And I think that for me is the lyrics. A lot of that comes from that interest and familiarity with singing and song.
Thank you. It's interesting you mentioned that, and also painting, because I was just thinking about something that I think it was Sonia Boyce said about we learn to paint or draw before we learn to write, and we learn to kind of sing or do these melodies before we even learn to speak. Which is quite really important.
Because my little girl, she can sing Happy Birthday. She's 18 months, and she basically her older brothers would sing that to her whenever she was upset, and it got a bit annoying. But so now she can go, Happy Birthday, and she can't speak, but she can sing that. So what you're saying is true.
And it's interesting you actually say that about Happy Birthday and singing, because my mum can't speak, so she's non-verbal. But one of the things that she's been able to do in the 3 years since she became non-verbal is sing Happy Birthday to my brother. So it's quite interesting in that singing. There's something about that that brings that out. And of course, I suppose drawing or illustrating, or just even just shapes is more expressive, isn't it, than writing? So that's an interesting one. But I will stop babbling on for now, and I don't know if anybody has any questions or feedback, and we'll take the questions to the floor. If you just wait for Kyle to go with the mic, just so that we can pick up the audio on the film. Thanks.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello? I don't know.
Yeah,
cool. Hi, Lakwena.
Hi.
First of all, thank you so much. That was such a valuable... So much that you said really resonated. I think especially as an artist, kind of finding my feet in contemporary practice. I really related to what you said about contemporary and modern art. So when I was younger, it felt almost like a joke that I wasn't in on. I just didn't get it, and there was just so much about it that felt like it wasn't accessible, or that for whatever reason, whether that was my own insecurity or just what I was used to, and it kind of felt like it needed to be provocative or kind of shocking, and that it had to kind of fit within these parameters. So I guess one of the things that I love about your work is that it's contemporary, but there's this kind of sense of community and accessibility which you went into, which I think is really apparent, in the way that it exists, where it exists, how it looks and stuff. Also, I think I'm interested in knowing whether or not this is sort of thing that's been an issue for you. So you mentioned that maybe you're not a marginalised person anymore, but obviously you kind of represent, perhaps in the art world, as a marginalised community, as a woman, as a black person, all these things. Has that sort of ever been an issue in terms of the kind of work that you are given? Have you been ever sort of pushed towards making work that is about, these kind of identities? Or has it been kind of quite organic in the kinds of work that you make, being this kind of open, almost about community and openness and accessibility, rather than kind of having to wear this hat necessarily? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, yeah, I think it's just been, thanks for all the things you said. I love your show, by the way. That's your show, isn't it? It's brilliant. Anyone who hasn't seen it, I'm sure you will have, upstairs. It's brilliant.
Oh, second
Is
floor,
it downstairs?
sorry. Oh, ground floor, sorry, yes, yeah.
Okay, it's brilliant. But yeah, I don't feel like I've been pushed to make work. No. I feel like I have kind of taken an interest in this stuff, and then it's people have taken an interest in the work and then maybe asked me to make more work like that if they're asking. But yeah, I don't feel like I've been pushed to make work. And I think
that's really encouraging actually, because I think one thing that, you know, for me is something that I'm conscious of is, you know, if there is kind of an opportunity to make work, if there's this kind of feeling that if you're marginalised, then you've got to make it about that identity or about struggle or about something linked to that, as opposed to being able to make what you want or being able to kind of invite all of the community into what you're making. So
yeah.
It's nice to hear that that's been, you know, for you a thing that's just been organic.
Yeah, yeah.
And does anyone else have a question or comment? Oh.
Really important question, the H&M clothing range
Yeah.
for kids, is that still available? Because I really want to buy it.
I don't think it is. It seems to be available in other countries.
Oh, really?
I don't know. It was available for a while. It kind of, I think it travelled. And I didn't get all the stuff I wanted. Like, it was a bit disorganised, although they were great, you know, to work with. But, like, yeah, I didn't get all the stuff I wanted. But, yeah, thank you. I got a bit on Vinted. It's weird. Kind of, like, sounds like I've got a weird ego thing. But I searched, you know, Lakwena H&M on Vinted and managed to get, like, one of their... Somebody had basically had something they'd hardly worn.
Yeah.
So I'm just slowly gathering more bits. I've got a stash, but I'm getting a few more bits.
I might have a look. But so it's amazing that you've reached that stage in your career where these big brands are looking to you, looking to your talent to work with you. And I was just wondering what that is like as an artist and what thought process you maybe have to go through before you agree to lend your vision and your personal brand to kind of a corporate organisation. Is it hard to make that leap? And what do you have to think about before you decide to give your kind of identity as an artist to a corporate brand?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think for me, like right from the beginning, so I studied graphic design. Right from the beginning, I've always had to do stuff for other people, because that's how I was making money, you know. I was making money at the beginning by doing what somebody else wanted, responding to a brief, right? But I would be trying to find a way to speak and to say what I wanted to say within that. Do you understand? So that's kind of how I've continued to approach it, is that I still need to make money. And that's why I'd work with someone like H&M. If I didn't need to make money, I probably wouldn't work with them. I might, because there is, like I said, there's a degree of like accessibility that it brings, but and like a reach. But I don't know if I'd bother, you know. But I am. So for me, it's can I work with these people and still say what I want to say within that? So that's how I kind of approach it. And also, what do they stand for? I know that in terms of ethically, I'm not sure their slate is totally clean, which is a shame. But I'm not in a position where I can, like I said, if money were no object, I could just say no. But I think the way that the economy is, I'm in a situation, I think probably most artists nowadays, are in a situation, which I think is quite interesting actually, because I've got this kind of line of thinking that I've never read about. I kind of want someone to write about it. But chatting to artists who were, you know, let's say 30 years older than me, who could have a studio for, you know, £100 a month, like a massive warehouse space for £100 a month, just the different decisions that they were able to make with that freedom. Do you understand? Which I think is quite an interesting conversation. And the idea of selling out even, that, you know, I feel like that phrase was used quite a lot back then, but I feel like people now, it's almost like a universal acknowledgement that we all have to kind of sell out, but we don't use that word because we realise we all have to do it, most of us. So it's an interesting conversation, but it's something that I'm interested in.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question or a comment?
Sorry, I've just got one more.
No, it's okay.
Yeah, just what you were just saying to Mel just then. So obviously with your background in graphic design, I sort of am a commercial illustrator and I'm kind of just stepping into this like contemporary painting sphere. I just wondered if you ever had any sort of, I mean obviously that your graphic design is a massive part of why you're able to kind of visualise and work in the way that you do. But was there ever any sort of imposter syndrome about, because people can be sort of like, this is one thing, this is another, and how did you, if so, how did you overcome that, or do you still kind of feel as proud of that stuff as you do of your art? Is it just all one thing? I'm just interested in what your sort of take on stepping that into like contemporary art is.
Yeah, it's a big question. So I think for a long time I felt kind of imposter syndrome, which I hear that everybody feels anyway. So for whatever reason, everyone feels it. But I think I definitely felt that. But I think more and more I feel free to just say, well, that's the background I come from. And I think as I've progressed more, I now have the confidence to say, well, that's where I'm coming at this from. And also I think for me, there's kind of an element of that, which is the reason that I studied graphic design was because I knew I needed a job, that I knew I needed to make money somehow. And for me, the idea of fine art was, I was like, well, what do you do with that? So I'm aware that that is my history, that's where I've come from, and that's why I ended up doing that and going down this route. And I'm very grateful that it's worked out. But I think I've definitely felt imposter syndrome at times. But I think sometimes it can give you a different perspective on things, which is quite good. And I also think that that kind of ability to and flexibility and adaptability to be able to kind of dance around, do something with H&M, then do a show at Yorkshire Sculpture Park, you know what I mean? I think is actually an advantage. And in terms of me and my desire to connect with people, with ordinary people and like a large variety of people, actually having that, being able to operate in those multiple spaces is an advantage. So I think it works quite well.
I agree. Thank you.
Okay, does anyone else have a...
Hello, thank you very much. It was a lovely presentation. I love the work. In terms of your public artworks, how much does the audience drive the text and the colour and composition of the work?
It depends. Generally, it's not the audience, it's, what would you call them? I guess the curators, you'd call them curators, probably, yeah.
Or the commissioner.
Exactly, the commissioner. So it's like, I'll propose something and then the commissioner will approve or not approve it. If it's something that is in collaboration with the brand, they'll obviously have sometimes a quite clear. I did this project with, it's really one of those things. I did a project with Nike Girl Effect, which is a charity that's connected with Nike. And it read The Power of Girl, right? And people loved it. I found it really cringy, right? The words "the power of girl," but I did it. I'm not like against that, but it just felt cringy to me. But anyway, people loved it, and that was a situation where they'd given me those words. But most of the time, I'm putting words out there, and then they're approving or not approving it. But let me think. Obviously, on a project that was where it was very much based in community, the artist would have to collaborate with the community. Actually, there was a project we did. Yeah, when I did that project in Seven Sisters that I showed you, we also did another part of that project, which was this a workshop in a local school. And with the young people, again, I collaborated with my sister, Abby Morrow, because she's a songwriter and workshop leader. And they came up with these words, beautiful words. It read, "Sisters, hold your brothers close." And it was in reference to street violence that young boys felt at risk of in the local area. And they came up with these words. And so it was really beautiful. So often you come up with some really beautiful stuff. But yeah, that's in a situation where it's very clearly more of a community engagement project.
Thank you. We've got time for a couple more questions, actually. Yes, is there a hand up? Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here today. I just wanted to ask, what advice would you give to your younger self about your career? And is there anything, if you could go back, is there anything you would change?
So yeah, what advice would I give to my younger self? We were chatting earlier, weren't we? I was chatting to Eugenie earlier, and we're talking about, I guess, just the amount of time that you have when you are younger. Most people, some people don't, but a lot of people have a lot of time and not many responsibilities when they're younger. And I think I would just say, use that time. And to be honest, I did. But I think what I would change, I would probably have tried to connect more with community when I was younger, in terms of creative community. Like I said, because I've tended to be a bit of an introvert, that's not been a strength of mine. But I think as an artist, for so many people, it's about being part of a creative community and, you know, that kind of network that you have. And when you're younger, you've got the time to hang around at private views. You know, you've got all the hours of the day kind of thing. So I think using that time to connect with people, I think, is something that's really good to do. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And is there anyone else that would like to ask a question or share a comment?
Hello. I've just got a practical question, really. I just wonder how many of your installations are sort of permanent or semi-permanent. For example, Temple Tube Station, is that going to be there forever, or, you know, is that intended to be permanent, or how long lasting some of them are?
Yeah, so it really varies. So with a lot of the wall paintings, they'd be quite temporary, like a couple of years, maybe even shorter sometimes. What have I got that's permanent? That painting of Seven Sisters is permanent, but it needs touching up. That Brent Cross project was a permanent artwork, which was really kind of special for me. The temple installation was there, I think it was for about 2 to 3 years, but it's now been taken away. And we actually need to trying to find somebody to take the tiles that were put, they're reusable. So if anyone knows anyone who would want like a load of tiles to cover, that we could almost recreate the artwork elsewhere, please let me know. But yeah, a lot of them are temporary for a time, and then they'll be changed or painted over. Yeah.
And just actually, interestingly, one of our technicians that works on regularly on our exhibition installs worked on the Temple Mead Station project. Yeah, so he speaks highly of the project, and that he really enjoyed the process of being part of that as well.
That's nice.
And I think could potentially have one more question or comment before we wrap up.
Thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you for the conversation. I just have a comment and a question, like following up with the earlier conversations on the commercial aspects of the practice and how it is important economically, but I also feel like they're always important to reach out to a newer set of audiences, isn't it? Like within the gallery and within the spaces where people expect to see these things, it's like preaching to the converted in some ways, and like going to places when it's not expected, like in merchandise, it's like a completely different place, and where people doesn't usually expect that, and is a new audience in some ways. So I really think this barrier between the commercial aspects and the artist has to be negotiated more openly and more easily. And as an extension as well, like do you, I often see that there is a necessity for our artists to present in social medias and to maintain these things. So how do you like negotiate that? Like how do you, is it organic for you? Do you like put time to do that?
Well, I have in the past, but you'll notice that I'm really sporadic now. I just had to let it go. I'm going to get back on it. I think in September it'll be like a new leaf. But I don't enjoy it. And in terms of social media. But I do think it's really important. So I'm going to get back on it. But I just, basically with the kids and everything, I have just prioritized. And it's not a priority. So it's had to slip. But I do think it's important, so I'm going to get back on it. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So yes, I think that leaves us to the end of the conversation. So thank you so much, Lakwena.
Thanks so much, everyone.
It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. And Lakwena's travelled from London specifically for this conversation today. So thank you so much. And thank you to all of you that have come here this evening. I know some of you have travelled as far as Birmingham just to come and attend this event today. So we really appreciate that as well. Thank you so much, Lakwena, again. And thank you so much to all of you. And enjoy the rest of your evening.